You're listening to the Get Out of Your Own Damn Way podcast, episode number 96. Did you know that you make decisions even when you don't? Sounds strange? Well, I will explain more in today's episode. You decide even when you don't. Welcome to the Get Out of Your Own Damn Way podcast. I'm your host, Krylyn Peters. Each week, I bring you inspiring messages to help you create the life you're meant to lead. Buckle up, buttercups. Last week, we talked about procrastination, and it is not a mistake that we did that before today's episode about decisions. So, do you ever get stuck in that place of not wanting to make a decision, of putting off making a decision because you think it's somehow going to magically be easier or less painful to make that decision? Then today's episode is for you if you said yes to that, because we're really going to talk about this whole idea of making decisions. And I'm actually going to go through a 5-step process for how to make decisions. Now, I have a warning here about this episode. Making decisions means putting on your big girl pants. I'm sorry, it just does. It means taking responsibility and doing things that are not necessarily comfortable. So with that in mind, keep listening at your own risk, or you might want to just stop listening right now. However, if you're still with me, yay! And remember that making a decision is all about commitment. When we put off making a decision, we are making a decision by default. So this is something I love to talk about, is making decisions by default. So when we don't decide, when we say, I don't know, what we're doing is we are basically making the decision, but not taking responsibility for it. And I know for me, when I do that, it doesn't feel very good. It doesn't feel like I'm being in integrity when I just make decisions by default. I feel weaker. I feel less empowered. And those are not ways that I like to feel. I would rather just make the decision. And you know what? Sometimes people are going to be really pissed about the decisions you make, or they're not going to understand the decisions that you make, and they're going to question them, and they're going to put their 2 cents in, and their opinions and their criticisms, and screw all that. You are the decider. It's all about what is best for you, whatever decision that we're talking about here. Decisions that you make are for your benefit. They certainly can benefit other people, but they don't have to. And it doesn't matter what other people think. It doesn't matter that they agree or don't agree with your decisions. And that's another thing to talk about too, is it's really awesome when people agree with your decisions, right? But who cares? Like, they don't need to agree with your decisions. It's all about you being able to make decisions that are in the best interest for you and what you're going through, what your experience is, what you are creating for your life. So, you ready for this 5-step process here? So, making decisions doesn't have to be hard. It just requires some commitment, like I said, and it requires those big girl pants. So, if you need to go get them, take a pause and go get them, put them on, and meet me back here. Here we go. 5 steps. The first thing that you want to do when you're making a decision is to identify the possible outcomes. So I'm going to just say that we have a decision to either do A or B to make it easy. So there's only 2 possible options here for your decision. Now, I know that sometimes there are more, but for the sake of this episode and brevity, we are going to just assume that there are only 2 possible outcomes. So you want to identify your possible outcomes of making a decision, or basically saying yes to A or yes to B. Okay? Then you want to evaluate the possible outcomes. So now that you know, well, if I go down this road, this is what's going to happen. And it could be way more than 1 or 2 things, right? And then if I go down this road, what are the possible outcomes? So you need to evaluate the possible outcomes. What could happen? What's in my best interest? And figure out overall which one is best for you right now. I think one of the tricks that we get tripped up by is we start to think, well, what if something happens down the road? So now we're looking into the future. And there's, of course, the short future, which is, maybe later today, tomorrow, next week. The kind of the shortest amount of time that is in your decision making area, right? You could be making a decision that's going to have a short term effect and a long term effect. But if you're looking at the future, like long term, long term, you don't know what's going to happen. You could, something could totally botch everything and you have to make other decisions. And that happens. I mean, how many decisions do we make in a day? Think about that. How many decisions from the time you open your eyes in the morning to the time you close them at night? How many decisions? You probably don't even remember because we do so many things on autopilot. However, there are so many decisions, and one decision can affect others. And then we have to course correct. And that's kind of a little bit down the steps that we're going to talk about. But I want to be really clear that when we look too far into the future, when we're evaluating possible outcomes, it can prevent us from being able to make a decision. So when I say evaluate the possible outcomes, I'm talking about the short-term outcomes. So don't overthink it. That's the message here, is don't overthink it, okay? So we have step 1, which is identify the possible outcomes. Step 2 is evaluate the possible outcomes. And step 3 is now to choose a course of action. Okay, this is where your commitment comes in. You've got to make a decision. Make it. Just do it. Because here's the thing. You are always able to make a decision right now in this moment with the information you have available. Let me say that again in a different way. You can make a decision right now because you have enough information to make that decision. However, tomorrow you may have more information, which means, and this goes into step 4, which is course correct as needed, is when you get more information or different information, conflicting information, then you can change your mind. Who knew? You can change it. I promise you can actually you can make a decision and then change your mind. It happens. Go for it. And it's not the end of the world. This is what I think happens sometimes. We get so invested that this one decision, oh my God, it's going to affect the rest of my life. And then we think, well, it has to be perfect. I have to make the perfect decision, and it can never waver because I am set in stone. Am I ringing any bells here? Oh my gosh, because yeah, this happens. And I'm guessing this happens to you. And I'm guessing this happens to people you know, because it happens to most of us, that we just get into this mindset of being stuck. If we make a decision, oh my gosh, if I start this business, I will be married to it for the rest of my life. And I won't be able to change it. It'll always have to be the same. Or, gosh, let's take that analogy of marriage. If I marry this person, then, I have to give up all of these things, and it's going to be the same as it is right now all the time. And luckily, at the beginning of a relationship, things are usually pretty good and we want them to remain the same. But you know what? Life happens. Things come up. Challenges arise, and we must face them. And how do we do that? We, say it with me, we make decisions. So it is not set in stone. I promise. You can course correct. Even if you made a decision and then a minute later you have more information to go, oh, I'm going to change my mind. It's okay to change your mind. All right, so that's step 4. Step 5 is to rinse and repeat. Come on, people. So you've got to do this. You've got to keep stretching those muscles. Keep doing the things that are working. Like I said, you make a ton of decisions from the time you get up in the morning until the time you lay your pretty little head down to sleep at night. Just start becoming more aware of that process, because I know you're really aware of making decisions on the big things, on the things that aren't happening all the time. You're probably not making huge life-changing decisions, every day as far as what am I going to wear and what am I going to put in my mouth. We kind of get on autopilot with those decisions. However, with the big decisions that you are facing in your life right now, do this process, because it will help you. And once you make a decision, then you're free of that turmoil, or it can be turmoil, but of that energy of mulling over, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? It frees you. It frees your energy to go on to your next decision, and then go on to your next decision. So that's why I put rinse and repeat in there, because we're not ever done making decisions. I'm making a ton of decisions right now as far as what the words are going to come out of my mouth, what I'm going to say, what I'm going to do with my hands as I'm talking to you. So this is a really good process, and I want you to follow it. I'm going to say all the 5 steps again. So the first one for making a decision is to identify the possible outcomes. The second is to evaluate the possible outcomes. The third is to choose a course of action. So this is where you commit. And the fourth is to course correct as needed, meaning you can change your mind. And the fifth one is to rinse and repeat. So go out there and kick some decision-making ass. Thanks for listening to the Get Out of Your Own Damn Way podcast. If you've been inspired, please share the podcast with your friends. You can find us on iTunes or at Krylyn.com. KRYLYN.com.